Hi, Joe Martin here, and we've been talking to you lately about your job being essential. So here's the question. Do you have the tools to be considered essential in today's changing job market? Our 2-year degree programs do just that. From HVAC, instrumentation and control systems technology, to construction management. We have a degree plan specifically for you. So go online or call our exceptional admissions team to get started. ITI Technical College, for a better life.
This is Sports 225, incredibly starting our second quarter century. Sports 225 is brought to you by Breck. And now, me.
Well, this is a different Sports 225, but this has been a different time in Baton Rouge, and specifically in LSU athletics. And we'll get to that with Andrea Gallo, who's a reporter for The Advocate, who's been covering the entire story, the stuff about sexual abuse, Title IX, the Hush Blackwell report. But I would tell you, as a journalist, even as a sports writer, and I put that in quotes, you have stories that you do where they stick with you, and some you just take home at night, they keep you awake at night, others you just throw away, and most of the time it's just business as usual. I cannot imagine having been a reporter the last month covering this story, number one, and number two, simultaneously being sued by the state attorney general. And so I go to Andrea Gallo, who's here in Baton Rouge, and joins me by Zoom, and God, your life the last month must have been nuts.
Thanks for having me, Lee. It's been pretty wild. I haven't gotten a whole lot of sleep, but it's been kind of invigorating at the same time. I think these are really important stories, and I love any chance to really dig deep on an important story like both of these have been. So it's been good in that respect.
When this first broke, I had Nancy Armour on from USA Today, and they had that first story. And it's always, kind of shocking when it comes from the outside, so to speak, and we hear about it. But then from there, it's just snowballed for you. But I do want to talk about the LSU thing. But first, what's it like to be a reporter and get sued by a prominent official like that? It must have been crazy.
Well, it's funny because, my life has been so dominated by these two stories over the past few months. And actually, whenever we found out about the Jeff Landry lawsuit, I was working an LSU story on a really, really tight deadline. It was the day that we found out LSU was under this Department of Education Clery investigation. I was in the middle of that story trying to hit a deadline on it. And then I got this email that said, I think the subject line was like, Jeff Landry versus Andrea Gallo. and all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh. So it was kind of indicative, I guess, though, of how like these past few weeks have been, because it's just been back and forth. Jeff Landry, LSU, Jeff Landry, LSU. So yeah, it's been very fast paced, but it's been, I think we've done a lot of really important journalism, and that's what makes me kind of proudest of the whole thing.
Well, and most importantly, you won that lawsuit, and anytime the media has freedom of information and gets what they need to do, and people are acting the way he is, I mean, shame on him, and good for you, and good for The Advocate and NOLA.com,
Well, thank you. Yeah, we're thrilled that we won and we got the records, and we've been able to report on them, and getting them was really enlightening because they were there were some very serious allegations in them, and it kind of made us understand why Jeff Landry's office fought so hard not to release them.
Yeah, well, that's not sports, but I wanted to bring in the professional and human element of this for you. And you're from Lafayette, you went to LSU, and doing my crack research, I saw you had some pretty pedigree internships, Wall Street Journal, Dallas Morning News, Sacramento Bee. So, I mean, you've got a journalism training, and you're prepared to do this. There's got to be a part of you that's conflicted in that your alma mater has just embarrassed itself with this Title IX issue and allowing these sexual assaults and people not being culpable. I mean, it had that side of it had to be very disconcerting for you.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that this is one that hits close to home for me, of course, but I think for our readers as well. I've written a lot about various sorts of abuse at all kinds of institutions, but people seem more fired up about this one than they've seemed about any of the rest. And I think it's because, as you were saying, so many people have some sort of connection to LSU. If they didn't go there, they've at the very least been to some sort of game, or they've walked around campus or whatever. So it's been difficult to see an institution that you love go through something like this. But at the same time, I firmly believe that the way that LSU fixes all of this is by getting it all out and letting the public know what's been going on and moving forward. The way to fix it is not hiding it like they have been for years. So that's kind of what I see my mission as.
She is Andrea Gallo, a reporter for The Advocate, has done some incredible reporting, great writing the last month and beyond, but specifically the case at hand. When we get back, we'll talk specifically about that with her. Later on in the show, LSU professor Robert Mann, who is very vocal on all of this. I'm Lee Feinswag. This is Sports 225.
Breck is here for you. Refresh your mind online and outdoors with their Refresh Your Mind webpage. Check out virtual versions of some of your favorite Breck activities and adventures. See which parks are open and safe to visit, as well as ideas for you and your family that will revive and refresh your mind in a positive and safe way. You'll also find videos and content on Breck's social media pages. Visit Breck today without leaving your home. Breck.org/refresh.
We're back on Sports 225. I'm visiting with Advocate reporter Andrea Gallo, who has covered the LSU athletics situation, and I use that term way too loosely, but specifically the Hush Blackwell report that came out last week. And hush just seems like the perfect word for the whole thing. Andrea, there's so many elements of it. If you were talking to somebody who is just coming on board and going, well, what happened? What would you tell them?
Yeah, well, it's a long path. It's a little bit difficult to distill it quickly, but here's what I would kind of explain. I would say that this goes back to November of last year when USA Today published an explosive investigation into how LSU has handled allegations of sexual assault, domestic violence, and those sorts of issues, particularly around athletes. After that story was published, more and more started coming out, and we've been reporting on it. And LSU commissioned an investigation from this law firm, Hush Blackwell, and they said, we're going to do a review of how we've handled these cases, and we will release it to the public. And that's what they did. They've been doing this review since November. They released it the first week of March. And it was very thorough and very damaging for LSU's reputation. It was a 150-page report with another 100 pages of evidence and exhibits, and it really didn't pull any punches. It walked through kind of case by case how LSU had failed on a number of ways, and those included things like LSU not having enough staff just to handle Title IX investigations. It talked about the tone at the top of LSU athletics, which included a sexual harassment investigation into Les Miles that there wasn't very much action on. And then there were other issues as well where people had just kind of raised alarm bells for years about these problems and nobody really took action on them.
That was an incredibly awesome, concise summary of the situation. Thank you. As we're taping this on Tuesday, our show doesn't air until Friday, the first time. But, I woke up this morning and the first thing flashing at me from all of my devices was that Kansas had fired Les Miles. He's no longer with their program. And well, when you sat in that news conference and the report was issued and you saw and heard everything from the LSU officials, did you feel like on the LSU side, they were being sincere and they really want to make things better?
Well, I think that the Hush Blackwell report is surprisingly thorough, and it, like I said earlier, it really doesn't pull punches. And to me, that was a bit of a surprise because I don't know very much about the law firm Hush Blackwell, but I do know that oftentimes when institutions pay their own money to commission investigations, regardless of them getting like an outside firm or whatever it might be, a lot of times those don't come back in particularly damaging ways. I mean, it's like you're paying for this thing, so a lot of times it makes you look good. And so I was surprised that this investigation was as detailed as it was, and that it really pointed out so many failures on LSU's part. Not because I didn't think that those failures existed, but just because I kind of assumed that with LSU paying for the thing, it would have been a little softer.
Two of the main characters who were here during all this are no longer LSU employees. Joe Oliva, the athletic director, who, correct me if I'm wrong, actually came out looking a little bit better than one might have expected as a result of that. And Les Miles, who we talked about, the football coach, who came out way, way worse. The Les Miles revelations and everything that came as an addition to all that this week was just sort of like, what? And then, but do you agree with me that this may in some ways only be the tip of the iceberg, that there will have to be further personnel adjustments, and I use that term a little too loosely too, at LSU, and maybe there are going to be civil suits to come with this?
Oh, definitely. I think there are already some civil suits that kind of got the ball rolling on this. Actually, one woman who accused Darius Geis of rape when she was at LSU. She's a former tennis player who hasn't gone public with her identity yet, but she's part of a civil suit pending against the NCAA. And that suit was part of kind of what led to USA Today's initial reporting on all of this. And I expect that this will open the door to more of those sorts of actions, though Louisiana has a 1-year statute of limitations on Title IX suits, as far as I understand. So if somebody has a Title IX claim against LSU, I am not sure that they will be able to pursue a lawsuit unless it happened within the past year. But there might be ways around that. I mean, we see, like with Catholic Church sex abuse claims, for example, there are interesting ways that people have worked the statute by saying that, the abuse happened decades ago, but they've only recently kind of become aware of how damaging it was to them or whatever. So I guess we'll see if the victims here are able to do something like that.
This is fascinating to talk with Andrea Gallo, the reporter for The Advocate. I got a couple more questions for her. We got time for one more segment with her. I'm Lee Feinswag. This is Sports 225.
Breck's crews are keeping spaces clean and safe for you in our parks during this difficult time. Governor Edwards deemed outdoor activities as essential in his stay-at-home order, but ordered the closure of playgrounds, other high-touch places, and banned groups of more than 10 people. So you can walk, hike, bike, or run in parks, conservation areas, and trails. But please stay 6 feet away from others and avoid the places blocked off by tape or closure signs. Let's work together to play it safe at Breck Parks.
All right, we're back on at Sports 225. We're visiting with Andrea Gallo, the reporter for The Advocate. Later on in the show, Robert Mann, the LSU professor, who is very outspoken about a lot of things, but particularly the issue at hand, which is the sexual assault, Title IX, total failure by LSU to do so many things on so many fronts. And Andrea, I think everybody expected going into the Hush Blackwell report that athletic director Verge Osbury and, his colleague, Miriam Seeger, both were going to be disciplined or possibly fired in some way. But I think other people thought there was going to be stronger sanctions on them, and then other people would be disciplined / fired. And, there's an awful lot of longtime employees there on many fronts in the athletic department and football office. And there's a lot of football coaches, all of whom seemingly escaped unscathed.
Yeah, definitely. There's There's some interesting controversy about this for sure. I think that you're hearing from students right now in particular and other kind of activists around the country that they think LSU needs to take stronger action on a lot of these things. I mean, in the case involving Verge Osbury, he's accused of, he got a text from a player in 2018 saying that he had just hit his girlfriend, and he has admitted that he says he called the player afterward. The player recanted the confession, but then Mr. Osbury did not follow up on it. He didn't check on whether the player was okay. He didn't report it to Title IX or to police. And, you know, that's a very serious situation that I think a lot of people are asking, you know, if you don't lose your job over something like this, what do you lose your job for? And then with Miriam Seeger, the report is kind of interesting because on one hand, Miriam Seeger was kind of the go-to person in athletics for reports of Title IX violations. And so you see her in a lot of ways actually helping students, particularly women, female student athletes who have these sorts of accusations. But then in other ways, she is accused of not doing her job properly. And the kind of main thing that Hush Blackwell took issue with regarding Miss Seeger was that whenever they got one allegation of rape against Darius Geis, she created a report about it, but she didn't put Geis's name on the report. And Hush Blackwell basically said that had you put his name on this report, you would have been able to better track through time that allegations against Darius Geis were mounting during his time at LSU.
Yeah, I also thought I was kind of stunned about no repercussions for the tennis coaching staff, a husband and wife team. And I was also surprised that no other athletic department officials on any level, including the football staff, were either disciplined or fired. Now, is it possible anybody was given double secret probation without us knowing about it? You know?
I don't know. I think that it's possible, sure, but I think LSU is in a position right now where they want the community to understand that they're trying to address these issues. So I would think that any sort of secret discipline wouldn't really help them as far as that purpose goes. But you're right. It was interesting how the report kind of rehabilitated the reputation of the cells, who a lot of tennis players have spoken out against over the past few months. But the report found that they did not fail to act on allegations of abuse, that they reported them to Miriam Seeger, and that is more where the problem happened. So, you know, it's important to have all of the facts. And I think that Hush Blackwell did the best that they could to figure out what these people knew and when they knew it. And as far as all of the evidence that they reviewed went, the cells were, they were okay.
Well, I got to tell you, this is fun and fascinating to have you on. I really appreciate it. You can read Andrea Gallo stuff at theadvocate.com and NOLA.com. And you have done a magnificent job, both as a reporter and a writer, which isn't always, you know, coinciding. And you should be really proud of yourself. And I'm so glad that not only that we have you in the community and that you won that lawsuit. And I want to thank you for coming on. Thank you so much, Lee. It's great to be here with you. All right. When we get back, Robert Mann, the LSU professor, has got some strong opinions about all this. I'm Lee Feinswag at Sports 225.
Breck is here for you. Refresh your mind online and outdoors with their Refresh Your Mind webpage. Check out virtual versions of some of your favorite Breck activities and adventures. See which parks are open and safe to visit, as well as ideas for you and your family that will revive and refresh your mind in a positive and safe way. You'll also find videos and content on Breck's social media pages. Visit Breck today without leaving your home. Breck.org/refresh.
All right, we're back on Sports 225. A reminder, please go to sports225.com to see when all the show listings are on Cox Sports Television CST and on Your View Louisiana, which is Cox 4. As I said earlier, we're going to be joined by Bob Mann, who's an LSU professor and journalism. and has a resume that is unparalleled in the wide world of politics, including being the director of communications for Kathleen Blanco. And Bob, I know you also work for Bennett Johnston, Russell Long, John Breaux. That's a pretty extensive. And you wrote a book about Ronald Reagan, which I was curious why.
Well, I'm fascinated by mainly by his political transformation. Why did he become why did this liberal Democrat become a conservative? And not many people had looked very closely at his transformation in the 1950s. So I devoted a lot of time to looking at Reagan in the 50s and discovered why he became a conservative.
The book is called Becoming Ronald Reagan, The Rise of a Conservative Icon. Did you happen to have a copy handy? Do you have a copy that you can show us?
Oh, it's over there in my.
Never. All right, go to Amazon.com.
I'd have to dive off screen for a moment to.
No problem. So really, the reason why you're here, of course, is to talk about everything that's happened at LSU in terms of the sexual assault charges, the Title IX improprieties, all the stories that have broken. And we talked to Andrea Gallo, who was in the first three segments of this show on Tuesday. Now this is Thursday morning, and a lot has happened since then. So, there was a big hearing yesterday, if you want to take it from there.
Yeah, almost the entire day into the night, a special committee, mostly of women legislators, grilled President Galligan, other higher education leaders, and a number of the victims of sexual abuse on this LSU campus. And what everyone who was there took away from it is that the legislature, the leadership, bipartisan, Republicans and Democrats, are not satisfied with how LSU has handled this scandal and are not satisfied with the sanctions that were imposed on the two employees of the athletic department, and believe that LSU has a whole lot more work to do, not just in going forward and revising its policies, but in accountability for what happened in the past.
Bob, you work at LSU. I know you love the university, but you've also been an outspoken critic of it. And a large reason for that is because oftentimes the tail wags the dog. And in this case, it's certainly been football. Is it naive of me to think that there'll be changes on the horizon?
I think the changes will happen mainly because of public scrutiny and press scrutiny. I don't think that. I don't think that the kind of reforms that a lot of people who are skeptical of the influence or critical of the influence of college athletics, especially in big schools like LSU, the SEC, will be satisfied ultimately. But I do think the scrutiny and if LSU does follow the recommendations that the law firm Hush Blackwell handed to it in that report, I think things will improve. But this university's got to be much more committed to openness and transparency. The university is still tales of some of these cases. In one case, the university up until just about a month ago was trying to prevent one of the victims, Samantha Brennan, from getting the records of her own case. The misconduct on the campus is not in the past; it's in the present. It's going on now. And it's got to end. And I think the governor and the board of supervisors. I think we need a new board of supervisors, for one thing. There's two women on this board of supervisors, which is a travesty. The governor needs to clean house out here, and I think it starts with the board of supervisors. And then I think a lot of people need to lose their jobs, not just these two people in the athletic department.
Yeah, I think that there are layers to this that still need to be unfolded, and civil suits likely to come. I think it's an ongoing story with legs. I'm sure you agree.
I agree, and I think that you will see a lot of civil suits, and you should. You should. These women have been. The university has responded to it, has added to their mental abuse, has added to the betrayal that this university first inflicted on them several years ago, and it continues. And I hope they do get justice one way or the other.
He's Bob Mann. He's a professor of journalism at LSU, among many other things. You should follow him on Twitter because he thinks outside the box and makes you think about things that you might not have otherwise, and also buy his book about Ronald Reagan. Bob, thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Lee. My pleasure.
All right. Hey, thanks for watching Sports 225. We fought some technical issues, lousy internet connections, and I could go on and on, but thank you and good night.
At carnival time by Baton Rouge Bay, that's the site of my story. At Spanish Town Mardi Gras, things can get blurry. See the mowers marching, prizes fill the sky. This Spanish Town Mardi Gras